And we're live. Hello, 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 everyone. For anyone joining, and yeah, I thought, well, I wasn't originally planning to do one of these, but things opened up, and here we are talking boxing. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of things gone on the weekend. Some pretty. I wouldn't say there was a whole lot of amazing action on the weekend, but it was pretty decent. Some decent boxing on the weekend, and as you can see from the ticker below, we had what the biggest superstar in boxing on the weekend, Canelo Alvarez, or Sal Canelo Alvarez, just destroying an opponent in Avenue Yildrim, who had been knocked out by Eubank Jr. within 3 rounds, which is just, yeah, for him to get that is yeah, it was shocking, to be honest with you. So um, yeah, I mean, this is something that I actually want to touch upon, and maybe if we get people in the chat as well that I want to discuss about. First of all, how do you get that mandatory position, and does it need to be looked at to see, like, for example, um, Yildrim, how did he get the mandatory spot in the first place? And obviously, after the fight, there's good news that there's a unification bout that's been confirmed. Canelo Alvarez versus Billy Joe Saunders. That's going to be really exciting for three of the belts. So the WBO, WBA, and IBF. Sorry, and WBC belts. The IBF belt with Caleb Plant, who I'm assuming if Canelo gets past Billy Joe, he's going to be fighting him later this year as well. Canelo wants to fight. So he fought December last year. He obviously just fought in February. So he's fought December, February. He was going to fight in May. He wants to fight in September and then December again. That's 5 times within 12 months, or just over 12 months. Just ridiculous stuff. And from someone who is clearly, I think, the biggest superstar in boxing. It's great to see, to be honest with you. It's fantastic to see, in fact. And let me know what you guys think as well about the whole situation with. I mean, the whole situation, right, with Yildrim just makes me think, like, the WEC used to be the most renowned organization out there, and obviously you've got the prestige behind that green and gold belt, but more and more it makes me think, like, what's going on with the WBC? They've had the franchise belt, which kind of, to me, comes across as the WBA super and the WBA regular situation. You're like, do I really want to be? I mean, who's the champion? So what was it? Teofimo Lopez. Teofimo Lopez says, "Yeah, actually, I'm the undisputed." But then Devin Haney goes, "Well, actually, you have to beat me to become undisputed." And then Mauricio Suleiman comes out and says, "No, no, Tiffy was the undisputed," which is fair enough. He beat Lomachenko. Surely, that is the biggest thing, beating Lomachenko, and then somehow he's taking the WBC franchise belt. Does that make any sense to you as well? Anyone? Does that make any sense? So the WBC, for me, it literally makes absolutely no sense at the moment. It makes little to no sense, and I'm just thinking to myself, like, and then to just the cherry on top. The cherry on top is what? Is the cherry on top is then Avni Yildrim. Oh, here we go. Let's have a look at this. Got some questions in. Thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in. Please remember to like this video. Rendezvous says they made Yildrim wait 7 minutes for a Canelo's entrance. It looked like a carnival. So unprofessional. Yeah, really interesting, right? I mean, the whole normally Matchroom, I think, in general, put on pretty good shows, and I was expecting it to be another decent, I don't know, another decent performance in terms of a promotional standpoint from Matchroom. But yeah, very unprofessional. And yeah, Canelo, obviously there's a lot of hype around him because he is the pound for pound, I would say, best boxer on the planet. Let me know what you guys think about that. And what do you think about the opponent? I mean, Avni Yildirim hasn't fought in over 2 years. His last fight was against Anthony Durrell. He lost. Like, how is he in a position to be mandatory? Like, does someone want to explain to me how that works? Because I think even Mauricio Suleiman came out after the fight and said, "Look, maybe we need to review how we do it." David Benavidez, right, who was the WBC champion, he had to relinquish his belt because he didn't make weight for one of his title defenses. He is number one. So he's number one contender. Why is he not fighting Canelo? Right? Like, that's what should be happening. Canelo should be fighting. He should be fighting David Benavidez. And that would have been a fantastic fight, much more competitive. And instead, we got Yildrim, and I don't blame Canelo for taking the Yildrim fight, by the way, because he's going to fight 5 times in a year. It's not his fault. I'm saying the WBC, right? They've mandated Yildrim, and I didn't get it. So Rendezvous as well, and Tobias, thank you very much for tuning in. Let me know what you guys think, and everyone else in the chat, fire away with any questions or comments. I'll make sure I read all of them out, and let's get some type of conversation, debate going on here, because I'm really interested to know what you guys thought of that. And there's other fights that I want to touch upon. Joseph Parker versus Junior Farr was just, let's be honest, it was pretty boring, wasn't it? Went to points and all this talk of like bad blood, etc., and nothing really came of it. It was more clinching and holding and all sorts. So it was just, yeah, that was bad. And then Zhili Zhang, there's a lot of like hype around him because he's so tall, and especially for someone from China, you don't get many boxers from China being that tall and having that kind of presence. And he was supposed to beat Jerry Forrest, and then it went to a draw, and he's actually been hospitalized, so hopefully he recovers. And there was also a UK card where Tommy Fury won on the Queensberry show on BT, and I actually interviewed one of the guys on the undercard, Masood Abdullah. Check out that interview if you're interested in it as well. Tobias Morgan says, do we put Canelo, I think he means Canelo, not Cancelo, Canelo, as the best Mexican fighter of all time if he unifies against Buddy? I don't think so. There's just so many good Mexicans, you know. I think at the end of his career, if he continues to go on the trajectory he's going, like, he'll have an argument for it, I think. But I mean, there's so many. I mean, like, there's so many. There's so many amazing fighters from Mexico in the past, and I'm trying to think. Does even Oscar De La Hoya, does he count? I guess he's American. He's like Mexican American. So I don't know if he quite counts, but he's like Ryan Garcia, isn't he? So I don't know if he quite qualifies. But obviously, you've got Roberto Duran. You know, you've got Julio Cesar Chavez Senior. You've got, like, there's just, I mean, the list just goes on. I mean, there's some incredible fighters, which, like, they're just incredible list. So I think at the moment, I personally would say no, but I mean, he's definitely eking towards that type of status if he carries on at the trajectory that he's going. And I mean, if he beats Billy Joe Saunders, then goes on to beat Caleb Plant, then you're definitely talking about some serious wins. I wouldn't say the super middleweight division is so strong compared to some other divisions at the moment, but like, he's kind of already cleaned up at middleweight. So I guess super middleweight's the next thing. I mean, if he went on and did something crazy, like, for example, at the back end of his career, if he goes and fights at light heavyweight, or fights at, well, he fought at light heavyweight already. He's beaten Kovalev, right? But I think most people, if you watch that fight back, he didn't actually look that good in that. He was getting out jabbed, so just because, like, there's weight classes for a reason, right? But then he caught Kovalev with like this peach of a shot, and that was it, game over. And Kovalev's conditioning hasn't been the same at the back end of his career because of, you know, out of ring issues, let's say. So yeah, I think if he was to go up to light heavyweight, beat someone like Beterbiev, that would be unbelievable. And to be honest with you, if he did something even more crazy, like he went up to cruiserweight, I'm talking about, it went up to cruiserweight like at the latter end of his career. So we're talking about like the last year of his career. He could dare to be great, and he could do a Roy Jones, right, and go up to cruiserweight. The issue with Canelo is he's quite short, but he's stocky, so he could potentially get away with it. It'd be really tough. Like, he'd be pushing massively. I've said this actually in my live straight after the fight. I said, look, he's naturally not super middleweight. He's naturally I would say a light middleweight, maybe a middleweight, but he fills out his frame very well, I would say, Canelo, and he makes the weight nicely. So yeah, if he went to cruiserweight and fought, even if it was a weak champion, I'd be like, fair play, like, you're definitely up there, and he's definitely getting to that point. Rendezvous says first round Yildrim was outboxed, went to the corner, wasn't even looking at his coach while he was giving him a pep talk. His ego was crushed. You know what? A lot of people have said, this is going to be really controversial. A lot of people have said that he pretty much just went for a payday. I'm of two thoughts on that. And my first thought is I can't really judge them because I'm not a boxer myself, and every boxer that gets in the ring, like, I know it's a cliche, but they do risk their lives going into the ring. So who am I to say whether someone's, gone in for a cash grab? But second of all, does it really matter? As in, would I say, oh, actually, no, he shouldn't be doing that. He shouldn't be going in there just for money, knowing that he's probably got 0.001% chance of winning, and actually he doesn't even want to go to he doesn't want to dig deep. He doesn't want to go to a dark place to try and win this fight. He'll just give it a decent go for half a round, and if he thinks, actually, no, I'm going to get beaten up here, he just thinks to himself, I don't really fancy this. But do I blame him? I mean, you only get a chance to fight Canelo, maybe not. Lots of fighters won't. And to be honest with you, the type of caliber of fighter that Avni Yildrim is, like, he would have just been licking his lips thinking, this is life-changing money. So I don't blame him for taking it. I mean, his attitude, I think, again, it's difficult to say. But yeah, his ego, I think, was crushed. And the thing is, I think a lot of fighters as well, when they are head-to-head with Canelo, they think, oh, you know what? He's really small. I'm so much taller than him. I can just use my physical advantages. I've got a bigger reach. I can rough him up. I'm physically stronger. What they don't realize is as soon as they get into the ring, Canelo's got this low sense of gravity. He's strong. He can bully you, but not just that. His jab is so good. It's so underrated, and he finds a way. And Callum Smith said this when Canelo fought him. He finds a way to somehow get within distance to pop his jab and out jab you, even though he's got less reach. And it's to do with his feet, and it's calculated pressure from Canelo. And his feet, I wouldn't say are elite, but pretty much every other part of his game is. And his boxing IQ has improved substantially over a number of years now. And the fighter that lost to Floyd Mayweather when he was 21, he's I'd say that's like a tenth of the fighter that he is now. Well, that's maybe an exaggeration. Maybe a quarter of the fighter that he is now. Like he's probably improved fourfold, fivefold, I would say. But yeah, he just didn't really look like he was up for it. And Rendezvous says Yildrim deliberately asked his manager to stop the fight. Yeah, he just didn't look interested, did he? He got to the corner at the end of the third, and obviously that 1-2 from Canelo, just textbook 1-2, floored him, went to the corner, and I mean, Canelo, it was going to be over at some point. And I think Eddie Hearn said after, like, he was disappointed that Yildrim didn't go one more round and go out on his shield. Like, to be honest with you, who are we to say that someone should go out on their shield? It was going to be over at some point. Like, Canelo was going to deck him in either the next round or we're talking about, the round after. So it was just a matter of time after getting floored, right? So I don't think, I know Eddie Hearn wants it to happen, he's a promoter and etc., but I don't think so. I think, is it disappointing to see that? Of course, because he literally gave up. But like, unless you're a fighter yourself, I don't think you can really say that. Tobias Morgan says, who wins, Prime Calzaghe or Canelo? That's a really tough one, Tobias. That's really difficult. I say it's difficult, it's not. I think at the moment, I would say Joe Calzaghe even, sorry. The dude was just... I mean, I don't think... Even though a lot of people say that he was the best British fighter ever, and a lot of people say he was better than Lennox Lewis, if we're talking about pound for pound, ability-wise, skill-wise, etc. I think everyone says it's either Lennox Lewis or Joe Calzaghe. I think that's normally the general consensus you hear. People will say, like, Nassim Hamed was unbelievably gifted and probably the most gifted fighter out there, but the issue with him is that he probably didn't fulfill his potential, whereas those two, they did. Yeah, I just think in general, I'll go Joe Calzaghe. And it's so weird because I'm going to say something which is almost contradictory to what I said before, but he would obviously have the height and reach advantage and the physicality. But the difference between the fighters that Canelo's fought so far, who have been tall and rangy and can box like Callum Smith, Avni Yildrim, Rocky Fielding. I mean, Joe Calzaghe is he's a legend of the game, one of the best super middleweights ever. And when you got to light heavyweight, he was quality as well. And I just think generally, a good big un beats a good little un, and it's such a cliche, but I genuinely think Canelo was that good. Sorry, not Canelo, Calzaghe even. Canelo is that good, but I genuinely think Calzaghe was that good. And super middleweight was natural as well. It was natural. It was natural for him to make super middleweight. I don't think it is for Canelo. I don't think it is. I think he's pushing the boundaries, but it's like Lomachenko. 135 is not his weight division. He should be fighting lower than that. Canelo is filling out, so he's got the power there. But would I say that he's more suited at super middleweight? Probably not. He'd probably be better at middleweight personally. And Calzaghe, I just think, I mean, his work rate was incredible, and I think he'd be able to outbox Canelo. Would he get a decision though in Las Vegas? Is another question, because I can't see anyone beating Canelo on points in Las Vegas, and that would bring us quite nicely onto the BJ Saunders fight in a second, which I want to touch upon. But before I do, we've got a question from Jimmy231. This is really interesting. Which England cricketer do you think would do best in the ring? Ben Stokes, because of his previous record, let's say, which I think anyone who knows Ben Stokes and his history will realize why I'm saying that. Ben Stokes for me. Let me know what you guys think. So let's move on to Billy Joe Saunders. Actually, what do you guys think? Do you give Billy Joe Saunders any hope in hell of beating Canelo? Because I'm kind of in two thoughts. I think Billy Joe Saunders, people keep on saying he is the one that can beat Canelo. And before I got to that, Jimmy231 has said, folks, his quick hands would jab your head off. Quick hands. I mean, would they be as quick as Amir Khan? Maybe. He has got rapid hands. He really does. But yeah, I think BJ Saunders has got ridiculous footwork. Is super middleweight his natural weight? No. I don't think so. I don't think at all that he is. But before we go on to that, let's finish off this. Ben Stokes has that fire in him, at least to land a punch, says Rendezvous. Yeah, he does. Tobias Morgan says, I can see Billy causing problems, but I just don't think he'll have the power to him. Yeah, that's such a good point, Tobias. I personally think the issue for me is, and I guess we'll see on the night, but the issue for me is that, yeah, he's got the boxing ability, but does he have the power to earn Canelo's respect, I think, which is what you're trying to say, Tobias, as well. That's the thing. Not even like necessarily hurt him, but some people have respectable power that when they hit you, okay, I can't just go in with my, I can't just go in and stalk you down like Triple G and expect to not get hurt, like I've got to cover up, I've got to be smart about this. And that kind of showed in the last fight against Callum Smith that Canelo had. That Callum Smith hit him with like a few ridiculous like catch left hooks, which is his shot. Like he's knocked people out with that. And I don't know whether he might have been a bit weight drained, or didn't make the weight right, or whatever it might be. But either way, his punches seem to have no pop. It was either that, or maybe he doesn't have the power that we thought he did, and maybe Canelo's chin is just ridiculous. But Canelo took it, smiled, and just kept on coming forward. And you're like, imagine how demoralizing that is. You hit someone with your best punch, and they smile at you and just go, okay, mate, thanks for that. And they just come forward and say, actually, that didn't faze me one little bit. And that's absolute carnage for me. I mean, it's just crazy. It's crazy to think that can happen. And BJ Saunders, had he got more power at super middleweight? I don't know. I absolutely have no idea. So let's see how it goes. And Everyone says that he's the type of person to beat him, but I don't know if he is. I think someone like David Benavidez potentially might be better. But the issue that I also have is if BJ Saunders does outbox him, which is a possibility, would he even get the decision in Las Vegas? Like, he's not going to. And is he going to knock out Canelo? Like, we've never seen Canelo hurt. So, like, if Triple G can't knock out Canelo, then how's BJ Saunders? So, I don't know. Let's see how it goes. But maybe BJ Saunders will turn around and put on a performance like Tyson Fury did against Deontay Wilder. There's that comparison there. They're both really good mates. And they say about Tyson Fury, like, when he fights someone of like an elite level, world-class level, he raises his game. Whereas when he fights someone like a Tom Schwartz, his level will go down slightly. So maybe BJ Saunders has it in him, but we haven't seen it yet. We've seen a glimpse of it against David Lemieux, but do we actually think that he can raise his level that much? Because I reckon Canelo's about up here and BJ Saunders down here. Against David Lemieux, he kind of went whoop a little bit up there, but I have never seen him go up to those heights. But that's not to say he can't. I feel like he's got that ability to do it. But let's see. Let's see what happens. I think it'll be a really intriguing fight. I can't wait for that fight, actually, because I've been waiting for Billy Joe to fight either Triple G or Canelo for a long time, because he's been talking about the big fights for absolutely ages. And Tobias Morgan says here, which fights are you most looking forward to this year? Could we get Spence versus Crawford at some point? No, not a chance in hell, unfortunately. Yeah, I mean, if I'm being perfectly honest with you, unfortunately, both fighters, are not huge draws outside of boxing. As in, they're not the type of like unless. Let me put it this way: unless you're a boxing fan, you're not going to be interested in that fight. It's not like AJ Fury, where you put on that fight and pretty much the whole of the country is going to tune in for that. I mean, they might not watch it all. They might not all watch it, but they will definitely be interested in the outcome. Spence Crawford, they put that on in America. I tell you what, like, I don't think it's doing great numbers, unfortunately. I don't know. I just think Crawford and Bob Arum allude to this, but Bob Arum is Terence Crawford's promoter. He's saying like, oh, Crawford isn't like a huge draw and like he doesn't promote himself enough, but Bob Arum's job is to promote Terence Crawford. So, yeah, okay, fine. You can say like Terence Crawford needs to do slightly better self-promoting, but why the heck is he not promoting Ryan Garcia sorry, not Ryan Garcia. Why is he not promoting Terence Crawford correctly? Because he hasn't been. Like, it's simple. Like, he just genuinely hasn't been. On the other pond, or the other side of it, you've got Errol Spence, right? Fantastic win against Danny Garcia after coming off that DUI and all those issues where everyone was like, "Is he going to look the same?" And he just looks so damn good. And the next thing you know, he can't. The issue that I have as well, both these fighters are like, I think they've got each other's numbers or whatever, and they talk and they're like, yeah, we can make it. But then Crawford's like, I want 70-30, and Spencer's like, I want 70-30. Can they just take the example of Fury versus Joshua? If this fight gets made, which I'm from the sounds of it, which I want to touch upon a bit later, is it looks like it's 99% done. Just split it down the middle, because if they fight, right, and I think what's going to happen is Spencer's going to fight Ugas, who's now got the WBA belt, because Pacquiao has relinquished it. He's now like a champion in recess, which basically just means that when he wants to, he can fight for that belt again. But Spence will fight Ugas. He'll probably win that fight. It might be a close fight, but I pick him to win it. And then after that, he'll go to Crawford and say, 70-30, mate. It should be 70-30 to me. But you don't see Joshua doing that. Joshua was doing that before, but he's realized the error in his ways. There's enough money for everyone to eat at the end of the day, and you just got to split it down the middle and just say, come on, let's work together. But the issue, as I said, is that there's not as much money in this fight, and these guys want money, the type of money that unfortunately neither generate. They're not huge enough pools. They haven't done enough work for the promoting themselves, and to not need to have the promoters, because at the end of the day, it's a promoter's job to promote. It is what it says on the tin. So, yeah, I don't think it's going to happen. It's one of the fights that genuinely, like, apart from AJ Fury, it's the fight that I want to see. But And this is what is frustrating about boxing. I don't know if we'll ever see it. And how sad is that? Horace Arshad says, when is Ryan versus Pacquiao? It's not going to happen. So there's all this talk about Ryan Garcia versus Manny Pacquiao, for anyone that doesn't know. And Manny Pacquiao came out and was like, well, he didn't say anything, actually. Ryan Garcia just put up a poster saying, yeah, it's on. Which is crazy, right? Because he just put it out, like, promoting it, and nothing had been officially said. And I remember I was even talking about it, doing videos on it, like, oh, this is, like, okay, it must happen then, right? Like, why would a fighter just put it out there? And he was like, yes, confirmed. Can't wait. Poster out, everything. And next thing you know, they're like, no serious conversations. And yeah, it's not going to happen because of the weight difference or whatever. And Pacquiao has basically just said no. And I think basically what happened is Pacquiao wanted McGregor. McGregor obviously lost in the UFC to Poirier. Is it Poirier? Is that how you pronounce his name? I don't know. Anyway, to Dustin. And that scuppered everything. And then Pacquiao was probably like, oh, should I get a bit of money from Ryan Garcia? And he's like, actually, I don't really need him. And that's what happened. And Ryan Garcia. And talking of the lightweights, this is really good. Do you follow Javante, the Tank Davis? Yeah, I do follow him. A really good, fantastic knockout against Leo Santa Cruz. What a fight that was, right? He's obviously thinking about moving up to lightweight. He actually is. It's interesting because I think he's only fought once at lightweight, or hasn't at all. But the fight, well, he has fought once. But his recent fight wasn't at lightweight. It was at super featherweight, which is a division below, against Leo Santa Cruz, and obviously he knocked the heck out of Leo Santa Cruz, but it was a pretty close fight whilst it lasted. But the uppercut was just monstrous, like one of the knockouts of the year for 2020. And yeah, he is an incredible fighter. And it's funny because I've talked to a lot of pro boxers. By the way, guys, if any of you are interested in listening to my voice, but forget about my voice, boxers, like pro boxers. So I've interviewed former world champion Ryan Burnett. I've interviewed like current British boxers like Denzel Bentley, who's the middleweight British champion. I've interviewed who else? Like loads, like Tyrone McKenna, Maxie Hughes. Who else? I even interviewed Hannah Rankin, who fought against Savannah Marshall recently. She fought against Clarissa Shields even. Yeah, I've got loads of interviews on there. I can't even remember because there's so many of them. But yeah, I think it's like 20 plus interviews, different fighters on there. So yeah, go and check it out if you are interested. Oh, Johnny Fisher, who fought recently in the Ron Football. I interviewed him before his debut as well. A really, really nice guy. So yeah, check out all those interviews. I've got a playlist called Boxing Interviews. So it is what it is. And same for cricket as well, which some of you are fans of cricket. I've also interviewed some international and also domestic cricketers as well. But yeah, Javante Davis at lightweight is just, I think he'll be a beast. I wanted to see him versus Ryan because after Ryan Garcia beat Luke Campbell, he was calling out Javante Davis's name even though Devin Haney was there, which is bizarre. And that doesn't like it's going to happen. But Ryan Garcia is saying he wants him. Javante Davis is saying he's got a hand issue. Neither have got a fight lined up. Make it. But then I'm talking to all of these pro boxers when we're doing interviews, and I'm asking them, like, what do you think about Ryan Garcia versus Tank Davis? And most of them are saying Tank puts him to sleep. And I'm like, okay, fair enough. Well, I guess you know what you're talking about. And then when you look at, I guess, the people that they fought, and yeah, like Tank is coming up, and he's going to be giving up, height and reach. But maybe they just think he's just special, and he does look like a special fighter, doesn't he? He really does. Horace says, do you watch basketball, American football? No, unfortunately, I don't watch either. Apologies. Rendezvous says that Ryan versus Javante. Ryan is losing that fight easily. Yeah, exactly. So exactly what Rendezvous is saying is what pretty much every fighter that I've talked to so far has said, that Javante Davis is just basically knocking him out, which is really interesting. Harris Arshad says, are you actually a fan of any of these fighters? Yeah, I'm a fan of lots of fighters, really. I wouldn't say that I'm a massive fan of one fighter. If you want to talk about in the UK, so I've been to quite a few AJ fights in the last couple of years. Went to AJ versus Povetkin, AJ versus Parker. Yeah, and I was going to go to Luke Campbell versus Lomachenko because I really wanted to see Lomachenko, but like unfortunately didn't happen. But yeah, I mean, I love lots of fighters. To be honest with you, I don't have any specific fighter that I think, oh, I'm a massive fan of this guy. As in, like, he is my favorite fighter at the moment, anyway. But yeah, I rate. I mean, boxing just in general. Like, I feel like you can love different types of styles, and everyone's slightly different. And it's one of the only sports where I feel like there's a plethora of styles that would definitely attract you in different ways, which is really cool to see. And actually, it's so technical. It doesn't. I feel like as a casual, if you watch it, or someone who doesn't watch boxing, if you watch boxing, you just think, oh, it's just so like one dimensional. They just punch each other. That's it. But when you actually look into it, and like you look into people analyzing it, and like the commentators or whatever else it might be, like watching channels and stuff. Like, I watch loads of boxing channels, and yeah, and like people talk about it. It's amazing because you really get a feel of like, okay, technically this is what's happening, and you realize how technical a sport it is, and it really is. It says here, that's the same thing that happened with Amir Khan and Pacquiao. A little bit, but not quite, because Ryan Garcia is, and I'm going to be perfectly honest with you, he's won absolutely nothing. He hasn't won a world title, has he? He's at the beginning of his career. He's now had one notable win against Luke Campbell, which is a very good win. So fair play to him. But Amir Khan at the time when he was chasing Manny Pacquiao, and actually, Horace, Amir Khan is one of the fighters that got me into boxing because I saw him in the Olympics, and he won the silver medal. It was 2004, wasn't it? Athens, yeah. And obviously, I've followed him quite closely, also just because he's British Pakistani like me as well. And yeah, I mean, he was one of the best light welterweights I think out there. I think he was that good, and his hands. Everyone, like, I've had so many people say, like experts say, that he had the quickest hands they've ever seen. Like when he was in his prime, like genuinely, like the quickest hands they've ever seen. Like they just don't understand. It was just God given. He just unfortunately loved to stay in the pocket too long, and I don't think he has a glass chin. I just think kind of similar to Ryan Garcia, although Ryan Garcia is more power, and his hands aren't quite as fast, but he's got more power because of it, because his feet are not as good. That, like, unfortunately for him, like Amir Khan just used to go in with his chin up in the air in the pocket and didn't used to come out, and that's why he just got knocked out a couple of times, like the way he did. The Canelo one, by the way, like anyone's getting knocked out by that shot, and he moved up 2 weight divisions, so I can give him that one. And yeah, but he was chasing Pacquiao Mayweather for ages. Mayweather said, actually, if you fight Devin Alexander, I'll fight you next. He fought Devin Alexander really good, and you're thinking at welterweight, you're thinking, oh, okay, this fight's going to happen, and then Mayweather announces the Pacquiao fight. So close yet so far, and he was chasing them for years. He's still chasing Pacquiao now, and I don't think it's going to happen. Tobias Morgan says, thoughts on the state of the score? Oh, this is a really good question. Thoughts on the state of scoring in boxing now? In light of recent fights in the UK, do you think that the UK is becoming a hard place to get a decision as an away fighter, as Germany or Vegas? Yeah, that's a really good point. That's a fantastic comment, actually, Tobias, and I think it needs to be discussed. So let's go into that slightly. So, yeah, for anyone that doesn't know, like, there's been some really shocking decisions. Kiko Martinez against Zelfa Barrett. Like, Kiko Martinez won that fight, didn't get the decision. I mean, I think you can at best give it a draw. I actually really like Zelfa Barrett, but I don't think he won that fight. And I talked to fighters after, like Kane Baker, who sparred him. He's actually going to be on the undercard of the Dylan White Povetkin card, and basically he said, like, Zelfa Barrett, the back end of that fight, he said that's how he normally fights, and obviously he was winning those rounds, but he was saying, I don't know why he didn't fight like that the whole fight, which obviously is really strange, right? Because you'd think that that's how he'd fight, but he didn't. He didn't fight like that at all. He fought in this kind of very defensive, not very proactive way for most of the fight, and then he was down the scorecards. Well, he should have been down the scorecards. And yeah, like Lewis Fritzen got a very similar decision against Vasquez, where Vasquez like 100% won that fight. I think even Lewis Ritson was embarrassed after. And I'll tell you what, Lewis Ritson's going nowhere near Vasquez after that for sure. I don't think he's going anywhere near him. And Vasquez, talking of Vasquez, he also had a similar decision against him against Ahara Davis a couple of years back. And Ahara Davis to this day says that actually I lost that fight. So the fighter literally come out and said I've lost it, which says it all. So I think unfortunately the UK is like we're getting to a point where the judging is becoming poor. Like Eddie Hearn, every time he comes out and says, "Oh, it's a disgrace. It's a disgrace. It's this, is that," and I'm like, "Yeah, that's fair enough. Like, I understand that, and it's a good thing. Like, I appreciate that he comes out and does that. Like, well, one, he should do that, but two, like he's saying it's just poor. He's saying it's poor, and actually, he said like, look, we can't keep on doing this because away fighters will come here and think we have to knock this guy out to get the decision, and you won't end up seeing like top fighters come to the UK then because of it. And we don't want that. Like, boxing in the UK is huge. Like, let's not have it ruined because of some like shocking scoring. But yeah, Eddie Hearn keeps on saying it, but it's happening a lot on his shows. And actually, as you can see on the ticker, Parker beat Farr, right, on points. And some of the scorecards were shocking. 119, 109 was on the scores. And it probably should have been more like 115, 113. So, like, what's going on there? That's just shocking, isn't it? It's an absolute shocker, I think. Yeah, we need to sort it out. I'm going to get to all the questions. Don't worry. Please do keep firing away with them. Guys on the chat, thank you very much for joining. Please do remember to like this vid and subscribe if you haven't already. I think everyone in the chat has already subscribed, so thank you. I really appreciate it and your support. And please do remember to like the vid. It just means that it goes to more people and people are able to view it as well. Horace says, yeah, Amir Khan is a successful British boxer. He said, remember that Peterson fight, he got robbed. Yeah, I don't know. I think they could have gone one of two ways. A lot of people thought he was, a lot of people thought he wasn't. And Tobias Morgan says the Peterson fight was not a robbery. Okay, fair enough. It was a tough one. It was a pretty good fight. It was a close one. Peterson was a good fighter, actually. I remember as well. But the Peterson one, is that not? I'm just double checking because I don't want to say it and then be wrong because what I'm alleging is pretty interesting. So the Peterson one, isn't that the one? I'm just double checking. Yeah, but that's the one. So Tobias, you're right. I don't think it was a robbery, but the issue with it is that he failed a drugs test after. I think that's the issue that I have with that one. And I remember because obviously that's taken as a loss, and David Price actually has a lot of those, which is really out of order because how can it go down as a loss if I don't know, how can it go down as a loss if then after the guy tests positive or like fails a drugs test? Like, it should be a no contest. It's just ridiculous, and it doesn't matter what drug you fail. I think personally, if you fail a drugs test straight after a fight, and obviously that's in your system during the fight, then it has to be a no contest. Like, how can you get that win? And Amir Khan has got a loss in his record because of it. And look, I'm not saying it's affected his career. It didn't, because straight after he got the Danny Garcia fight, right? And he went into that a huge favorite, and yeah, obviously got beaten. And Tobias says here, really, yeah, he was given the belt back. But my issue is not that he was given the belt back, because I think that's the right thing to do, as you said, Tobias. My issue is that it's a loss on his record. And nowadays in boxing, when losses are such a big thing, I think it was a shock. And before that, he only had one loss in his record to Bradus Prescott, which was that one, which was crazy. It was over within 1 minute. He just got clipped, and that's it. And that was like a blip. But then since then, obviously, you have that fight against Lamont Peterson. And yeah, I don't know. But it didn't really matter, because then he got knocked out by Danny Garcia the next fight, which was like, yeah, we could talk about this for ages. But let's go on to some more of the questions. Horace says, people don't rate Amir Khan because of his life outside boxing, but he was a great fighter. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to go into his life outside boxing. He seems to be quite misled, I think. A group of people around him. I'm not necessarily saying his family. I think it's more other company. I think are bad influences, and I think he's made some bad choices. And I think, unfortunately, he hasn't. I don't think he's had particularly good role models in his life, and that shows. And your upbringing plays a big, big impact on, well, normally on the person you end up becoming. And he actually he's very, there's a lot of charity work, etc., blah blah, whatever, which is amazing. Like, it really is. But obviously, there's other choices that he's made which reflect badly on him, and there's always going to be scrutiny on him because he's a big draw here in the UK. Tobias Morgan says, how do you think White Povetkin will go? Assuming White does get it done, should he go gunning for Wilder? Yeah, 100%. I think he should. I think if White beats Povetkin, then I think that shows me a couple of things. I think number one, it shows me that he's been able to get over that loss very quickly, like he did the Anthony Joshua loss. And I think to beat someone who's just beaten you is mentally, more than anything, it's a huge boost. And I think if he'd fought someone else, I don't think he would have been satisfied. I think he would have thought in the back of his head, like, oh man, especially as he was winning that fight, he fought Povetkin a couple of times. Yes, Povetkin, I know, like, when you analyze it after, he was looking for that uppercut, that kind of really, like, it's just an incredible move where he just kind of slips underneath the left hook and then just goes up with the uppercut, the left uppercut. And it was a perfect shot, and similar to Tank Davis's shot, right, which knocked out Santa Cruz. They're really similar. And Povetkin, I mean, it's one of the best shots you'll see. It wasn't lucky because they saw him practicing it beforehand, and I think Dylan White's brother, said beforehand, like, I saw him practicing that before, and he was like, we knew that he was going to do that. So, like, we should have known, and Dylan should have known, and that's why he was frustrated with himself after. And that's why, like, if you see when he got knocked out, he got up and everyone was like, "Oh, you okay? Okay?" And he's like, "I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine." Like, he was very, like, I think he was just really annoyed with himself because he floored Povetkin twice. He was boxing pretty well. Obviously, he didn't have that killer instinct that we maybe thought he would, where he'd go pretty ballistic. He was a bit more cautious, which, look, it can work. I just think he switched off, and it's interesting. They brought in another coach as well who used to help with Lennox Lewis, and they're bringing people around Xavier Miller. There's a lot of question marks around it. Let's see. I think this fight will be a big test. He's obviously had that one fight now, Dillian, and they've had chance to rest and recuperate. But yeah, if Dylan White wins that, I've always said Dylan White versus Wilder is such a good fight. Seriously, it's such a good fight, and this is going to sound pretty left field, but I'd actually back Dylan White. And even though it sounds so stupid, but because a lot of people would just pick Wilder, right? Because you just think, because Dylan White says, I'm going to come forward and bully him like Fury did. I remember they did a watch along with Dylan White and Johnny Nelson, and they're both sitting there watching the Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder 2 fight. And they're watching it, and he was saying, that's what I would have done. He's like, I'm really disappointed because I wanted to fight Wilder and do exactly the same thing. I kind of think he would be able to do that. But obviously, if Wilder catches him, and that's the excitement about it. That's the excitement, that there's bad blood there. It'd be super aggressive, and I'd be thinking to myself, yes, like, come on, let's see this, because it would be an absolute cracker. Thanks to Tobias as well for the questions, Horace and Rendezvous. Everyone, please fire away. I'm going to probably do 5 or so more minutes of questions, so fire them away, and then yeah, we can wrap up for the day. But this is really good, actually. I want to do more of these live sessions where we can just do Q&As. I think it's good, and I'll probably set out more in advance so people have more notice as well, because it'll be nice to get more people on. We haven't even really talked about Joseph Parker versus Junior Farr, or Zhili Zhang, or even the UK, I guess, fights which were on the weekend, like Tommy Fury winning as well, although he fought someone who was 0-9, I think, so it's not that impressive, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. Tobias says, how do you think a fight between Joshua and Lewis would have gone? I'm convinced Joshua would have knocked him out, but there is an opinion that Lewis was better. Oof. Really? You think Joshua would have beaten him? That's really interesting, you know. And yeah, I think the opinion is, and like it's very, very hard to disagree, is that Lennox Lewis would have just beaten Joshua up, or even just outboxed him, to be honest with you. It's funny because if you watch the Joshua versus Pulev fight, and I'm a huge fan of Anthony Joshua, by the way, I really am. Anthony Joshua was employing this uppercut, right? Which is almost like a lead uppercut, or like when he gets, as soon as he gets into kind of mid range, you throw it, this right uppercut, and it'll just ward off someone coming forward. And Lennox Lewis used to do it all the time, and it's almost like he'd been watching Lennox Lewis, and he thought, I can employ it to my game. There's similar dimensions, right? It's similar height, similar build, the way they fight. They both got Olympic pedigree, right? Both are Olympic gold medalists. Lennox Lewis as well. At the start, he was super aggressive, like Joshua, and then once he got knocked out, he was, I wouldn't say he was cautious, but he was more calculated. Joshua, I think, is trying to be calculated, but also try and stick to some of that aggression, which, to be fair, Lewis had as well. But I think Joshua's got more of that aggressive streak than Lewis did. I feel like Lewis was more of a. I feel even now, despite the fact that I can see that AJ is improving his boxing IQ, I just feel like Lennox would have been too clever for AJ. And he also had the physical attributes to back it up. But AJ, it's difficult, right? Because AJ hasn't finished his career yet. When he finishes it, it could be the case that I think actually AJ could have done it. But the other issue is that the era that they fought in, and the era that Lewis fought in with Holyfield, Razor Ruddock, Bo, which obviously he never got. Famously, he never ended up fighting him because Bo threw the WBC belt in the bin because he didn't want to fight him, and Lewis was his mandatory, and Lewis had beaten him in the Olympic final to win gold. And obviously the fight against Mike Tyson, which I think happened too late, but the reason that happened too late is because when Mike Tyson was ruling the division, Lennox Lewis was still a pro novice, really, to a degree. He wasn't really anywhere near finished article, and he wasn't in his prime. But Mike hit his prime really early. Lewis hit his prime quite a bit later. So when they met, Lewis, I think, was always going to beat him. But it would have been interesting to see prime versus prime, like prime Mike Tyson versus prime Lennox Lewis, and seeing what would have happened. But yeah, for me, I think Lewis edges it for me at the moment. And if you see the people that he's fought, Lennox Lewis, I mean, it's just unbelievable. AJ, if he was to beat Fury twice and then say knock out Wilder, then I'm saying, okay, like we can talk about it. But until something like that happens, I think it's really difficult because if you look at the resumes, I mean, Lennox Lewis's resume is just, unreal. Even people like Oliver McCall and stuff, like they would have done really well in this era, I'm telling you. Frank Bruno, he still would have done pretty well. He was limited, but he would have done well in this era. But yeah, but interesting question. Guys, do we have any more questions? Otherwise, we might wrap it up a little bit. I might just touch upon the Joseph Parker versus Junior Farr fight. And also, actually, one thing I'd say is I'm really not disappointed, but it is disappointing actually to see that Lennox Lewis and AJ don't get on, because clearly they've got similar, backgrounds, being an Olympic gold medalist, world champion, both from the UK. Okay, you can say that. That doesn't necessarily mean they'll get on. Like, people with different personalities, yeah, they are, but I think both of them are pretty respectful when they were, Lennox Lewis is pretty respectful unless someone used to like chat a lot to him, similar like with Joshua as well. And there's the influence there that Joshua is kind of, he looks up to Vladimir Klitschko, who was coached by Emmanuel Stewart, and Emmanuel Stewart coached or trained, even Lennox Lewis. And then it's funny because then you have that Kronk link, but then Tyson Fury fights with the Kronk gym now with Sugar Hill Stewards. So it's crazy. It's crazy. Like the Kronk seems to be really prevalent in the heavyweights now. And obviously that's just because you had Vladimir Klitschko and Lennox Lewis, who are two giants of the last 20, 30 years, really. But yeah, just to kind of round up then, and yeah, guys, fire away with any more questions or comments that you have, and I'll make sure that we touch upon them before we do wrap up here. But otherwise, just to round up, I mean, Joseph Parker looked to me. Look, this is a former world champion. Is someone who I saw him. And I thought I saw him live right against Anthony Joshua. He was pretty disappointing there. Yeah, the referee didn't help in that, but he just didn't look like he wanted. He looked like not scared, but he looked very, very weary of Joshua's power. So did Joshua, to be fair, to a degree against Parker as well. But Parker, like, it's almost like he was thinking, "Oh, if I go to points with AJ, I'm the first person to do it, so that's fine." But actually, he should have gone in. I don't feel like he went into that fight with a mindset that actually, you know what, I'm going to go in and knock AJ out. I'm actually the superior fighter on the day. Then he obviously had that fight with Dylan White, which was really close. He could have won that in the end. I mean, he knocked Dylan White out. I think Dylan White was saved by the bell, and that was both short notice for both fighters. So that was really exciting. He was supposed to fight Chisora, then got bit by a spider. Then he's had a couple of like Mickey Mouse fights, and now he's fought Junior Farr, who's ranked number 5 in the WBO. I think number 7. Yeah, it was either 5 or 7. But realistically, I never had heard of him before this fight. I mean, perfectly honest with you, never heard of him. Before they even started discussing Parker Farr, like I'd never heard of Junior Farr. And yeah, like it was a pretty close fight. Junior Farr looks like a pretty decent fighter, but Joseph Parker for me like needs to be, if he's not going to knock him out, like it needs to be a landslide victory. And the scorecards suggested it was, but it really wasn't. There was a lot of clinching, a lot of like really messy, untidy work from Joseph Parker, and he's got a lot of ability. And I know this sounds really harsh, but I don't think he was in particularly good shape either. Like they say that he's been working on his fitness, getting into really good shape, and he looks heavy. He looked heavy in his fight in America against I think it was Chaz Witherspoon. No, sorry. What's his name? Shaundell Winters. Against Shaundell Winters in America, he looked like he'd put on some pounds, and he was way too heavy, and he didn't look like light on his feet at all. He's actually got pretty quick hands, and he's got pretty good feet when he's at a good weight, but he hasn't been at a good weight, I don't think, for quite a few fights, and like he needs to be. For me, he needs to trim down a little bit. He needs to be lighter on his feet. He needs to utilize his attributes. He's got power as well, but it's just all really untidy and it's messy. They're saying that they're going to make him versus Chisora, and I'm being really honest here. If he fights Chisora and doesn't knock him out, or at least dominate him, I mean like dominate him, then again like it just doesn't look good. I think it's a really good fight because Chisora will come forward and he'll force Parker to have to be aggressive, but yeah, I mean that's a fight, a long time coming, isn't it? That fight for sure. Zhili Zhang, guys, what do you think of him? The Chinese fighter was on the undercard of the Canelo fight, and he fought like a interesting fight against Jerry Forrest. That was 10 rounds, and obviously in the hospital. So fingers crossed. If you're wondering why Jerry Forrest seems familiar, that name, it's because Jarrell Miller was supposed to fight him on his comeback, right after failing that drugs test against Anthony Joshua, and then he failed on that drugs test, and so Jerry Forrest obviously came out saying X, Y, and Z, which is fair enough. But yeah, he that was an upset in a way because they weren't expecting it to be a draw. They're expecting Zhili Zhang to come out there victorious, and he's been calling out AJ and stuff, saying, "Oh, fighting AJ in China one day would be huge," but like on that performance, he's nowhere near, unfortunately. And Tommy Fury, as I said, won. Masood Abdullah. There are a couple of really good fights on the Queensbury Promotions BT show. And this weekend, for anyone that is interested, Clarissa Shields is fighting on her own little pay-per-view show. She's not getting any support from Showtime, which is really disappointing because, like, she is, along with Katie Taylor, like, they're the two biggest draws in the women's game, I'd say. Like Cecilia Breakhouse is really close as well. She's fighting against Jessica McCaskill, but she's fighting Mary Eva to care for the undisputed, I think, undisputed super welterweight title. So that's on 5th of March at the Dortz Federal Event Center in Flint. Apart from that, the week after we've got Chocolatito, man. Chocolatito. If any of you don't know who Chocolatito is, go and YouTube him or Google him and watch him fight. And so we've got Juan Francisco Estrada versus Chocolatito. It's a unification fight. Unbelievable fighter, Chocolatito. He's someone who was so good, like a few years back, like a pound for pound. Like, he is a pound for pound great. He'll go down as a pound for pound great, but he was in the pound for pound list, like top 3. And he's come back with vengeance in the last couple of fights. He knocked out Kal Yafai. So he's a super flyweight. And now he's fighting Juan Francisco Estrada. So that's on the 13th, I think, of March. Yeah, in Dallas, and it's for the WBC and WBA World Super Flyweight titles. So that'll be huge. Okay, any more questions? If not, if I don't see any more questions pop up, then I'm gonna wrap up here. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Please do remember to like this video. It really does help. Thank you everyone who has tuned in to the live as well, and for your questions and comments. And anyone that is watching this, please do remember to subscribe to get more content like this. And if you are interested in other sports such as tennis or cricket, I also cover that on my channel as well, so check it out. And if you're interested in listening to interviews with a number of professional boxers, ranging from former world champions to current British to current European champions, I interviewed Jazza Dickens, who's going to fight Gilly Galahad for a world title. If you want to listen to any of those interviews, it's a playlist on my channel called Boxing Interviews. Similarly, I've got it the same for cricket. I've got some cricket interviews on there, and I obviously do these Q&As. I do live watch-alongs, and I do reviews and stuff as well. Tobias says, cheers for that, fellow. Thank you very much, Tobias, and good stuff. Thank you again, everyone. And as I said, please do remember to like this and subscribe to the channel. And if you haven't already, Canelo fighting Billy Joe. Let's see how that goes. And I'll put one in. Let's maybe try and do this weekly, actually, this Q&A, because I think it's really good to discuss the boxing. Thanks, and stay safe and have a fantastic rest of the week, guys.